through a word. Thank you, Emmanuel Choir, for that special rendition. And we'll continue now to listen to musical rendition, Mr. Rupert Herbert and Miss Sanara Busu at this time.
And I've had the privilege of singing with him in a Benito choir for many years. And I always love to hear his beautiful tenor voice. But long before that, I can remember when I immigrated to the United Kingdom. Soon after my father to do for my father. And I recall telling my mother, go to Mr. King and ask Mr. King to assist you. I could have asked him to go to Mr. Johnson or to Mr. Williams. But I told Mr. King he was our neighbor and we had good relationship one with another. We still do. And so he helped my mother. And for that, I owe him my gratitude and my thanks and my undying respect. And so whenever I was asked to play something, I jumped at the opportunity.
make some remarks. I was a bit nervous about it. Where do you begin to speak about a man called Adolphus King? I didn't say Adolphus, eh? Notice I said Adolphus, because that is what he was affectionately known as. And to take it a little further, he adopted his father's nickname of Russia. He still, whenever he meets me or he meets one of my children, he always refers to them as Russia. Russia, how are you? I would just like to stand up and say, Mr. King, congratulations for reaching 90 years. But as an old roadier, I cannot just say congratulations for living 90 years. I heard very early in my life that he and his brother Walter, who I did not know because Walter had emigrated to Curacao. And he came back and spent the rest of his life in Old Road. But what I was told about Walter and Adolphus was that they were very good singers. And they used to bring down the Methodist Chapel in Old Road at Harvard Festival. I was disappointed when Walter came back. He never graced the church, because I'm certain that we as young boys would have benefited from the way that they sing. That was most unfortunate. But my earliest recollection of Mr. King was seeing him traveling through Old Road, maybe using the shortcut through Franklin's to get up to what is known as the Hole. Some people refer to it as the source of our water, but it was not the source of our water. Our water source was over at Wingfield River. Franklin's water traveled all the way to Brithday. And Mr. King, for many years of his life, journeyed up to Franklin's Mountain, day in, day out, rain or sun, hurricane or no hurricane, storms or no storms. He journeyed up there to ensure that the water was flowing to Brithday. Later on, he was moved, no one knows why, to work as a waterman traveling between Deep Bay, I believe it is, all the way back up to Old Road. Those were the days when traffic was little on the road. You'll be lucky if you get a tractor ride, much more a car or a truck. But those were the days. And he worked until he was, they use the word fired, but it was terminated. The other thing that I know and learn about Mr. King, that he loved farming, especially animals. He was the first man in Old Road to get land from Mr. Bradshaw to farm animals. And he led the way in the raising of beef and milk animals. I do not know if he still have his cattle. King was a proud man. He always wanted to ensure cattle from off the ground. He was the first man to bring what you call a chain hoist. And he guarded that with the apple of his eyes. I'm certain that if you were to look in his cellar, you will still find that black and tackle. Had it in a box, he oiled it to ensure that it kept in perfect order. You know, apart from being a waterman, he was what you might call a sunk. So he ensured that he had his own pipe wrenches, the stock and die. In those days, there were no PVC. So you just cut and fit. Exactly. You had to make sure that the threading was perfect, and so forth. So in the community of Old Road, he had served our community of Old Road well. He was always willing to come and fix your pipe. When all is said and done, he has lived a full life. You heard about his singing. But there are two things that strikes me about Mr. King. And they are from two songs. One is the one made popular, continued good health, and may you continue to sing to your heart's desire.
I wish to thank the family of Mr. King for inviting me to make these remarks at this special church service in his honor. It is an invitation which I readily accepted. I also wish to applaud Mr. King's family for their thoughtfulness in showing their love, their affection, and their appreciation for his life. And in choosing this sanctuary as the forum for doing so. You call that giving him his flowers while he can smell them, and bringing him before the throne of grace to do so. I got to know Mr. King when I answered the call to come to this church as an assistant organist and choir director, following the untimely passing of the late Miss Gwen Hanley in August of 2006. Mr. King was already a member of the Sandy Point Methodist Senior Choir, having joined its ranks in or around the year 2005. We had something in common. We both had to travel some distance to get to choir practice and to church service in Sandy Point. He had to get here from Old Road. I came from Frigate Bay. That was the first thing I noticed about Mr. King. He was from Old Road, but he was in the Sandy Point Choir. Later on, he told me that he felt the choir mistress in Old Road was not practicing the Old Road choir enough. He found out that Sandy Point had an excellent choir mistress, and he gravitated to the Sandy Point Methodist Church for that reason. That told me something about Mr. King. He is interested in improving himself. He had to pay a bus to come and go from Old Road to Sandy Point, but that did not deter him. The next thing I noticed about Mr. King was his extreme punctuality. Mr. King would arrive for choir practice half an hour before the appointed time, every time. For years, from September 2006, I am aware that he was always the first person to arrive, although he was coming from 5 miles away. That told me something else about Mr. King. He is a dependable person. He's organized. He plans ahead. He does not allow himself to be distracted from his appointments. He is a good judge of time, allowing him to leave room for the unexpected. His punctuality also speaks to his discipline and his enthusiasm for the task at hand. I was to discover that Mr. King at choir practice is focused. He does not chatter. His mind does not drift away. The other thing I noticed about Mr. King was that he was in his 80s. When you realize that this gentleman set out to change choirs in his 80s, going from Old Road to Sandy Point to do so, taking the bus back and forth, you begin to understand his independent spirit and all that goes with it. It was a gutsy move for any 80-year-old. Most of all, I could not help but notice that Mr. King has a very remarkable voice. It is a voice full of certainty, of conviction, of strength, and he has a passion for singing. For him, singing is more than a hobby or an activity. It is a calling. This is not something to be viewed lightly. Mr. King participates in the overall ministry of leading in worship. And for him, it is a joy and a privilege. Mr. King serves the Lord with gladness and comes before his presence with a song. I also soon noticed that Mr. King, unlike the average choir member, was willing to volunteer to perform on his own on special occasions. He has a wealth of sheet music he has accumulated over the years for harvest, for concerts, for Easter, for Christmas, for weddings, for funerals. Mr. King has sung solo items in every church in St. Kitts. All the big churches, the Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, the Moravian Church, as well as all the Methodist churches. And he has sung in what are known as the sideway churches as well. He has also sung in Nevis, twice, soloing. Not so long ago, Mr. King went to England for the first time in his 80s. He spent just a few weeks. One in Derby and one in Leeds. He sings with the Methodist Men's Commission, and he sings with the People's Action Movement caroling group when they go out to serenade at Christmas in church anytime soon. He tells me if he lives to be 110, he will have the same voice. Seriously, Mr. King can see him the same way out of town after choir practice. I soon offered him a lift from Sandy Point to our journey. Over the years, he opened up to me, told me about his life, the hardships he endured while being raised by his grandmother, Mabel Taylor, walking twice per week from Old Road, small boy, to his uncle Nehemiah, better known as Kant, with a big tray on his head filled with cassava bread made by his grandmother, and returning with a big sack of breadfruit on his back to Old Road. Every Wednesday and every Saturday, leaving Old Road in the 4 morning, he joined other cassava sellers, some with colorful names like Trouble and Meme Doodle, as well as Penny Bridgewater and Blanchard's mother, perhaps 8 of them together. The others went to the public market in Brithday. He left them, a little boy, and headed off by himself to carry on, walking through Bayfords and Green Hill. I learned that he joined the Old Road Methodist Church choir under Mrs. Lake at age 12 with his brother Walter. There was no junior choir. They sang with big people and learned alto. He remembers the organists, Mrs. Lake, Stanley Phipps, Eileen Walwyn, Tita Leader, Bertha Fell, Pappy Tyson, Mrs. Brown. Mr. King led an industrious, hard-working life as a water overseer and as a small businessman, an agriculturalist, a butcher, a cattle raiser, and a shopkeeper. He says he has always been in business. He still sells cooking gas, even at age 90. He is not a timid man, never has been. He can be fierce in standing up for his beliefs. This is a rugged individualist who values his self-sufficiency, his strength of mind, and his courage. He bought and paid for his first house, which was not his last, at age 25 in 1949, before he got married. He did it through his agriculture business.